What is up, everybody? Happy New Year. Thank you for tuning in to yet another edition of Coffee and Analytics, 1851's approach to giving you some insights that we're seeing that can hopefully help you on your journey to selling more franchises, which is what we're all trying to focus on. It's already January 12th. We are in the midst of kicking things off for the year, which means disappointment is already starting. But the most important ingredient in franchise development is patience. And I know that's also the hardest thing to have in life or in business, is that element of patience. So last year was the second full year that we had collected data from franchisees on what the buyer experience looked like. Now, the reason we did that was so that we could give you and our clients, whether you are a client or not, that we could give you the insights that were beyond last click. Now, last click is an interesting thing because it still is an indicator of how the candidate got into your website that eventually drove them to fill out that form. But much like what we've talked about in the past, there's a process to buy anything. That could be signing up for a membership. It could be getting a reservation on OpenTable. There's some sort of sales process that happens far beyond the interaction that you and I may have. And so diving into that information started giving us some insights into how can we approach a holistic approach to franchise development, which is something that we continue to put in play. Now, if you have read my note, fantastic. It gives you a jump start into what I'm going to talk about. But if you haven't, today's hyper focus is franchise PR and how to use it to impact your lead generation efforts. Now, a long time ago, I would have positioned our business much like other agencies and would have said franchise PR is lead generation PR. Flash forward now, because we know the candidate journey is complex, there are certainly signature moments, which I'll talk about, but it's more awareness. It's a part of the puzzle. It's something to get the message out there and hopefully push the candidate further. Now, where it works well is obviously late funnel stage human beings, where they're thinking about your franchise or they're thinking about a franchise and they get hit with some sort of piece of content that says, this is why you should care about this business or why you should care about this segment now. PR, at least the way that I see it, is the buzz component of impact on why someone should think about your business. So fundamentally, the things that you should constantly put out there from a PR standpoint is every signing should have a press release. Now, press releases are somewhat garbage, but call it a piece of content that you're able to distribute and celebrate the fact that you awarded a unit. With that piece of content, and we're not even pitching it to the media at this point, with this piece of content, you then need to build your distribution channels. So distribution channel one is internal, that's franchisees and your staff to celebrate, yes, we just signed another unit. And in an email, if you're welcoming that franchisee to your system, you're tying or connecting in another piece of culture to that process, which I think is deeply valuable. You're taking that release, you should put it on your website. Like every website, front and center, should talk about your latest franchisee. So figure out a way to get that release onto your website as a celebratory moment. And then distribute it, if you feel comfortable, to any interactions that you could potentially have with customers, because the pathway of least resistance in franchise sales is someone who is already a fan of your brand. And so that could be either an email database, which some don't want to touch that. That could be posting on your social channels and doing a little bit of an ad campaign behind it so that it can reach your fans or the fans of your brand. And then obviously giving it to your franchisees, and when you give it to them, asking them to share it on their social networks as well. So that's just the release. Now we take it out to the media. I think it's important to note that I was a former journalist. I still think I'm a journalist. I think this is a member of the media. But I was a former journalist who absolutely hated PR people. Hated them. They would call me in the newsroom. No, at that point, I'm in my early 20s, so maybe naturally I was an a-hole because of my life experience. But they would call the newsroom and they would say, "Have you seen my press release?" Now, this is the issue for all franchise brands. If your agency is pitching this way, "Hey, have you seen the press release that we've sent to you?" This is what's wrong with it. If you were to go and look at all of your headlines, are you seeing headlines that are just simply like insert business opens in insert market? Or are you starting to see content, whatever form it's in, content that's celebrating the franchisee and highlighting what they did before they became a franchisee in the form of content and media distribution? Go backwards. Me in the newsroom, I hated that they said, "Have you seen the press release?" And then when I would say, "Hey, tell me what the story is," they would fumble over their words and say, "Brand X open." What I fell in love with on the franchise side with the same thing that I fell in love with as a journalist is the whole premise that brands don't sell brands, people do. And if you really think about the buyer who has stepped into your business, they have invested a significant portion, if not all of their life savings, into your brand. They bought from someone who, in some cases, they've never met. They've invested their life savings into someone that they've never met, or they've met once or twice, expo, and then a discovery day. And so they've gone through all of this and they've bought in. Now, to do that, you have to be a special human being and most likely to have saved up a little bit of cash to get into this business. You had to have done something spectacular to get in there. And so when you tell those stories, now all of a sudden you're building a persona, and a persona ends up giving a pathway for how you can distribute things. So let's say your franchisee is a former accountant. You might tell your PR agency, "We would like this in the accounting trades, because if more accountants read the fact that we signed a former accountant, then hopefully they're going to think about, well, wait, if that accountant bought into this franchise, maybe I can." And that insight ends up being deeply invaluable in the process because you've nailed the persona, you've distributed it to the right media publication. And then when and we've talked about this, when you tie digital to it, now all of a sudden you're boosting the visibility of that PR. So this is release. Now we've started pitching it to the media. We've humanized the story, and we're lifting that up as a part of our way of building buzz around the brand. So I wrote, so when we started No Limit Agency, which is now Mainland, we pitched PR services just like every agency as franchise lead generation. To some extent, it was at that point in 2008, the candidate had only a few useful tools for covering franchises, portals, shows, and buzz. So what I mean at that, and this has been the transformation of the way that content or storytelling is distributed, is if we were to go back, and I'm using 2010, so we're talking about 13 years ago, go back to 2010 and think about how did a buyer find out about your franchise? It was the portal, it was a show, or it was PR. So then, of course, you're in the media, it lifted it very fast. Now, at that point, a little bit of online was being done, but content marketing is not really a thing. Social media is in its infancy, and it hasn't really converted over to brand-centric. And so there wasn't a lot of other buzz tool to be able to use. So we would book media then in 2008, 9, 10, and leads would come in. And now, because 6.4 months, they're around the web, it's a little bit different. And this is where, if you can lift up that message and use PR as a tool, but understand the way that it plays, it will set your expectations as a part of the process. So here are the things that we have found that make PR count. One, consistency is king. And I've mentioned this before, but a while back, we took a brand that had significant leads that would come into the system. And we paired it or matched it up, aligned it to leads. So PR hits, what happened with leads, and not brain surgery, but PR happened, leads went up. In weeks we didn't get press, leads went down. And so what that does is it shows consistency. So we can do that with content, which is where Many brands on 1851 choose for a weekly piece of content because what that does is it just keeps the heartbeat going, drumbeat, heartbeat, keeps it going. And so whatever candidates out there, we're just constantly seeing things like new signing, new opening, milestone, thought leadership, quarterly update. Like the drumbeat keeps going. I like heartbeat. So that's one. People over brand, stories that highlight a new store opening does not excite the candidate. Stories about people and life stories do. 3, great unit level economics still drives leads. And I put in my note that we have a client that no matter where their opening is, we get press for that opening. Press is part of it. Press drives awareness that the opening is happening. The energy around the opening, because there are lines out the door, creates a perception of what the sales volume is. In turn, people want to inquire. So this is a miss that I see on a lot of brands. They don't leverage signings openings as those good lead generation opportunities. So if you're on the sales team, any opening in your system gives you a boost opportunity that accelerates the lead generation, I think, actually faster than the 6.4 months. And then with your milestones, the signing, the opening, the first year, birthday, scale, all of these should have hits that have a piece of content that just keeps going out there. Again, getting that drumbeat going. Okay, so now after I framed PR is lead awareness mostly. Sometimes it's lead generation. Oh, side note. If any of you watch FranX, which we film on Thursdays, Brent and I talked about this yesterday. We had Brent's brand, Voodoo, on CNBC, and the text message that Brent sent me was, wow, the leads are pouring in. What I asked him yesterday was, were those leads quality or were they a little bit less quality? Like it was more of a knee-jerk reaction. Fascinating, which I think this ends up being the whole importance of the persona. The leads were actually quite good. And that's because of the audience that watches CNBC. So the audience was right. The personas were right, which means when we got awareness into that area of opportunity, the right people were coming in. And he actually said they're good. The other thing that he said is he's like, I'm totally bought into what you've been saying, Nick. It's 6.4 months. It's a year for us. That a year from now, we're still going to be seeing activity from that. And so that's an interesting insight. You could watch back FranX from yesterday. Okay, so the next thing that I did in this note, again, as I always try to pull out data, and we've adjusted our data for 2024 that we can give you more insights as we continue on throughout the year. But now I took all the last 100 franchisees that we've profiled, and I wanted to see how do they get news. Because PR is great, but let's just say, for argument's sake, no buyer ever sees you on a podcast. Now, that doesn't mean you can't take the podcast and market it out to your audience. But for getting in front of that buyer, for trying to have that magic moment, if no buyer listens to you on podcasts, then should we really be doing podcasts, right? So it just gives it, again, a very simplistic, very, very simplistic insight. But here's what the question was. Like, how did you find that franchise opportunity, and how do you get your news? So 42% said they use social to find their news. So that means Facebook or LinkedIn news feeds or Twitter, X. So what that means is content distributed into the news feed, knowing that 42% are getting their information on there, is a tremendous insight into where are the buyers. So 42% are getting on Facebook, LinkedIn, or X, or YouTube. So now you either take your PR moments and you make sure they're in these channels, or you write content that can be distributed onto these channels, knowing that 42% get their news online, which that is mind-blowing. 8% use general business trades, biz journals or trade magazines, or general business TV, like they watch Fox Business. 8% get their primary news source is from there. 34% local media, which surprised me a little bit, but I love it because I've been very consistent in this. I think PR, the success metrics on PR, a quarterly national placement or signature placement is great for the buzz building, the as seen on, and then the consistency in the local media ends up having the greatest impact on lead generation. Other thing that I thought was important was 12% uses the Wall Street Journal as their primary. If I think back to pre-2008, I remember there was a franchise section in the Wall Street Journal. It was advertorial, but they would still highlight. They would hire a reporter who would write a story that filled this advertorial space. There's probably an insight like that actually worked for lead generation, which is probably why they were able to sell it. 4% uses entrepreneur.com or print. Now that one's interesting to me because I would have called Entrepreneur one of the larger trade pubs. Oh, and side note: the uses of general business trades or TV that can be 1851 did come up in that. Nation's Restaurant News did come up in that. QSR came up in that. So that's an insight there. But using Entrepreneur, I would have thought that would have been a higher number, but it's not. And so it's interesting. Like I've said this about the Entrepreneur 500, and I've actually said this many times about the award listings. What I find interesting is the disclosure of how brands are selected in what order won't be disclosed, which as we hit the end of this, I'm going to share with you our new surprise on 1851, which is in its infancy, but I'm going to show you the screen in just a little bit. But anyway, the transparency in listings ends up being tough. So I found that again fascinating. But 4%, so four buyers out of 100 use that as their resources. Again, trying to pull the insights of if I'm trying to create a mix of what equals winning. Local media was high, social media and content distribution was high, which is the whole point of 1851. Wall Street Journal was at 12%, general business at 8%, entrepreneur at 4%. So what does this mean? Milestones in local news, press hard on social, but use news in the mix, use your content. Wall Street Journal online, if you have a budget, could be interesting to look at. So point being is what I wrote, is that we should use the data and the shifts in research to impact organic lead generation. Understand that you have people at all stages in the buying process, the top of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, and the bottom of the funnel. Keep your brand front and center. Make sure the candidate can see a clear why you, why now when they get to your website. This coupled with what we talked about last month ends up being deeply important. Last month was all about the depth of franchise research because the buyer doesn't understand franchising. And now we're figuring out how do we now start distributing our message to have the highest and best use from the media if we're investing in that buzz creation through PR. Now, for sharing our newest thing, which most of you have seen, Growth Club. Growth Club has picked up. I think we're at 30 brands now. The goal is a brand a week that we're going to onboard this year. If you have not talked with us about Growth Club, be sure to do that. I think it's going to be a very fascinating tool. And now I'll share my screen. So our new thing, again, and this is step one. We're going to do it on the franchisor side soon. But what we've launched is our new supplier database. And so the idea here is all suppliers, it costs nothing to be in our network. And so what we did is we took as many suppliers as we could find, and then we categorized it. So you'll see we've uploaded one review that we've had on Mainland, just so that there is one in there, and it's legit, which I'll show you in a second. So I'm just going to click on marketing agencies, and we're going to click this, and we are going to do it by most reviews, and there's no reviews that are in yet. And so Mainland would be, I think Mainland's calculated under PR right now. So let's just click on, we'll click on Curious Jane. So the idea here is a few things. If you've used them, one, you can submit a review on how you've worked with them, and those are going to be calculated. And the brand page, if you have a brand page on the site, you'll have more about what the opportunity is. Our idea here was for a franchisor, new or established, could we create a toolkit? Yeah, Mainland's under PR. Could we create a toolkit that would guide the candidate through the process of finding the right supplier? Who are the suppliers in any of these categories? So we've broken out all the categories. Then what we did, so this would be a signature supplier. So we go to their brand page, and all these profiles are free. And so we look at Answer Connect, and so we've done Meet the Supplier with Karen, and so she comes up on her video, so there's more in-depth here. Supplier highlights, more content on who they are, and now here comes the magic piece, which I think is important. Because we're building this with transparency, you can sort by highest reviews alphabetically or most reviews. What this is going to end up doing is build our ranking system so that when we do the supplier updates on who ranks what, and like here are the 5 top marketing agencies, or in this sense, PR agencies, we're going to be able to showcase it based on real data. So if you are a franchisor and you've had a good experience with some sort of supplier, and again, there's tons listed in here, you can go ahead and submit a review. We have some featured one. Charles, his law firm's on here. Franet's on here. So you can use this as a tool. So again, find suppliers in a category, and obviously leave reviews for those that you appreciate. That's all managed on the back end, like PR. Obviously, we're the first one in here, but you can see what we did is we actually put a whole bunch of brands in here that are technically competitors on that front, because we want to make sure that everybody has a shot to be a part of this. So that's that. That's the big news from this month. Again, hyper-focused in on PR to give you guys some sort of sense. Vanessa just asked if our webinars are recorded. They are. They're actually streamed onto YouTube in real time right now, and then later uploaded onto the 1851franchise.com site. But that's it. That's our message. Transparency, PR, buzz building, trying to help you any way we can on getting you more franchise deals. I'm Nick Piles, publisher of 1851franchise.com. Grateful for you watching. Have a great rest of your January, and we will see you in February. Take care, everybody.